Jim, thanks for joining us on Total Rugby. I want to take you on a trip down memory lane. It's 14 years ago since the 1997 Lions tour to South Africa. Firstly, what were you thinking in terms of the forwards? What sort of characters did you want?
When you're taking on the South Africans, you have to have experienced forwards. Martin Johnson, Delalio, and players like that, Wood and Jason Leonard, who'd been there before. So we had to have a base of experience, but we also took some younger players to make sure we had a good mix. But you cannot be intimidated by the Springboks, or you're as well staying at home. So there was a mix of experienced players who'd been in tours before, and also some of the younger players that we thought we would come through.
One of the things I remember about that tour is that you didn't identify a sort of first 15, a test team early on.
Yeah, Ian made it plain from the start that everybody had a chance of playing in the test team. And actually, at the end of the tour, I think there's only 3 players from the original squad didn't play in the test team. Now, that was because of injuries and so on, but almost everybody got a shot in the test team eventually. And I think the players took that, on board as being, we're being fair. It's being fair to us. Those very experienced players there, who, well, they may have thought there was a pecking order, and there probably was when we started out, because you have to have some idea of who you're going to pick. For example, I think Gregor Townsend was number 110, and Scott Gibbs number 112, and so on, and Jerry Guscott was 13, and then you had Neil Jenkins, where to play him, because he was the goal kicker. So there were certain players who probably thought they were going to be in the team, and they ended up in the team. But there was a feeling of everybody being equal.
And I suppose one of the really valuable aspects of that tour was players like Jason Leonard, who were expected to be in the test team but didn't get in it, but was still big enough to help perhaps the man that had his place.
That was one of the most humiliating things for me, in a way. It was humble to see Jason Leonard helping Paul Wallace and Tom Smith, a man. Now, Jason could have played at tight head or loose head. He'd played test side in the test side on both sides. He also was captain of the first team that played. Jason was actually the almost vice captain, if you like. So to see Jason accept that he wasn't in the test team, and after the first test match, he wasn't going to get in the team because we won. And he was helping Paul Wallace and Tom Smith, especially Paul Wallace on the tight, because I think he expected to get in the tight. It was really tremendous, and shows them, the character and the mettle of the man. I have great admiration for Jason. I mean, I had a little bit of trouble with Jason Scotland the year before when he was cited by Scotland, for something, and so he probably, I was the coach at the time, the manager, and he probably thought, what kind of guy is this? And I probably had my views on him as well, but they were completely abolished and changed when I met him and got on with him, and I got on very well with Jason.
And I suppose Jason was part of some of those ferocious training sessions. We all remember the Living with Lions video. What was the point of those sessions? I mean, they looked unbelievably tough.
We were about the 4th game in, okay? Against Western Province, which is the game before, we played well, but our scumming was poor. And by this time, I was getting well with the players. I'd made a point of talking to the experienced players, and especially the forwards, and saying, look, I need your help. We have to do this thing together. I didn't, say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're not doing. I actually consulted with them, and we agreed that I had a big session with them in the dressing room or in the hotel room before, about forgetting about being English or Welsh or Irish or Scots, You're now South African, you're in South Africa, you have to accept what's there. And so we agreed to do that session after that. It was really psychological as much as physical. I mean, Tom Smith's short, right enough, but it was shorter after that because the machine we were using didn't move, So the players actually, I take my hat off them. We must have done about 60 scrums in about 15 minutes. And it was brutal. And I think Neil Backus commented on some, it was just stupid at the time, but it seemed to work, because although we knew the South Africans would take us on in the scrums, that has always been, that arrogance, they have to be the best. And they had Osdurant and Garvey and Drotsky and big second rows, they were going to pulverise us in the scrums. So we had to get some kind of parity in the scrums. Never domination. So we had to make sure that we weren't going to be dominating the scrums. So we had to improve our scrummaging, and that's why we did it.
That first test at Newlands, we all have our memories of it. Is there one particular thing that stands out in your mind?
I think the fact that we were still, Ian always said, if we're within 7 points with 10 minutes to go, we have the rugby players to do it. And it rang true in that game. We were still behind, and then Matt Dawson did the cheeky overhead pass that never was on the captain and the number 8, and then Alan Tate scored the try with a triumphant hand salute. So it was the last 10 minutes that I can remember where we actually, it was encapsulated all we've been trying to do, hold them, keep within points with Neil Jenkins kicking the goals, and then just drawn away at the end.
Alan Tate, of course, was one of a number of former rugby league professionals returning to Union that you took on that tour. John Bentley, Alan Bateman, Scott Gibbs. What did they bring to the squad?
Alan Tate led the gym work. That was one area that were good. They were also the way they conducted themselves at training and after training. And Scott Gibbs, I'd never met the chap before, but he was so intimidating. He used to shout at the centre opposite him, the player opposite, "I'm going to get you, I'm going to get you, I'm going to get you." And it sort of lifted the spirits of the other fellows. And so they could take anything. Nothing was new to them. Nothing, fazed them at all. So it was a great thing. And John Bentley's just different, he talks a lot and so on, but he's a character. As hard as nails as well. And so it certainly was a big bonus because it was the first professional tour.
The second test was in Durban, and my memories of that is South Africa scoring lots of tries, Neil Jenkins just sort of keeping the Lions in touch with the boot. What are your memories?
Actually, the second test was the one I feared for because we'd done reasonably on the first test. We were never totally dominant in them, but I told the players, this is the test, not the last one. They're talked about it for a week in the papers about, it'll be 1-1 after this one, and you only get a week between. And we actually froze, I thought. A lot of our players froze in the second test. And we didn't play well at all, I didn't think. We just hung on in there. And the result was what you want as far as a British person is concerned. But actually we didn't play particularly well. And Neil kept slotting the goal. So we must have been in positions to kick goals, because he's not the longest kicker in the world, but he was so accurate. And then, of course, Jerry Gusker kicked a goal at the end, a drop goal. So we were actually quite lucky to win the game. But the South Africans were very predictable. And Ian had worked out that the honeyball was a standoff, to use the modern phrase, took the ball to the line a lot. And he used players all around him, inside and outside. So with Scott Gibbs, Gregor Townsend's quite a good defender, and the flankers coming up, the coach was a very inexperienced, Carol du Plessis, hadn't coached the team before, so he's probably, his way of playing was completely frustrated by our defence, and they hadn't a plan B. He wasn't a kicker. And then only in the third test they went to a kicker. So they were actually found out tactically, as well as physically we did quite well. But Ian's idea of how to play them was the right one, and they couldn't respond. I don't think the coach was confident enough in changing them.
Geach famously said again on that video that you'll be able to look at each other, in 20 years' time, and you won't need to say anything. Is that true?
Oh yeah, that's absolutely true. It's not 20 years yet, but there's that knowledge, that you just share something that's almost unique with somebody else, And if I meet John Bentley or Paul Wallace now, or Jason Leonard, or anybody like that, Martin Johnson, that, you have that to go back on, fall back on. There's a great memory. And I've been asked about what, Grand Slams for Scotland or whatever, how do they compare to the Lions? The Lions in '97 was the greatest one for me because although I was just assistant coach, I'd been on 3 tours before and we got beaten in them all, twice as a player and once as a coach. I thought Lions were there to get beaten, So it completely changed my ideas about Lions tours.